Hey, welcome back to another episode, episode of Total Disruption. On behalf of myself, Dr. Jake Clendenning, and my counterpart, Michael Labersi. We got a great guest with us today. This is a gentleman I met a couple years ago. We've stayed in touch with. I'm really excited to talk to Scott today about all that he does. It's super interesting stuff. Uh, Scott Siri, how are you today, man?
Doing well, thanks.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to read the official bio of the amazing Scott. So, Scott is an author, entrepreneur, and educator. Working with aspiring professionals from around the world, he helps them plan, start, and finish their books. His expertise can teach them exactly what needs to be done to write the book the right way. Or, acting as a ghostwriter, he can learn their voice and do all the heavy lifting for them. In either situation, the end result is that the client becomes a published author and is seen as an authority in their industry. And that's the official bio. And there's so much more that goes into that. I mean, you as an author know that. So let's get into it, man. How did you get into the writing business? How'd you get into this game overall?
Yeah. So started about 17 years ago, 2008 ish. I was working for a guy. He couldn't pay me quite what I wanted, so I started freelancing on the side. Started realizing that I could do some writing and get paid for it. I had done a couple local magazine articles just for a friend, and they paid me like $20 for the article. Not a ton of money, but I wasn't expecting anything from it. And so I was like, oh, well, if I can do this on a small local scale, why not start looking to see what else is out there? And so I started blogging, writing some newsletters, doing other magazine type articles, making a little bit of money here and there, and just to supplement my income. And then after my son was born, decided to skip putting him into daycare permanently and just having someone else raise him. And I stayed home and quit the job and was able to just freelance kind of weekends, evenings, whenever he was napping and all that sort of thing. As he got older, it was a little easier to, send him to go play and I could work a little bit. And then once he was in school, obviously I had plenty of time. So I learned how to do copywriting and started working on websites and direct sales type stuff. And then about 4 years ago, an acquaintance approached me and said, "Hey, do you do any ghostwriting?" I was like, "Well, technically everything I do is ghostwriting because my name's not on it." He says, "No, I mean, do you write books?" I was like, "I haven't, but I've done hundreds of 1,000 to 1,500 word bios for people and magazine articles telling their story." I was like, "I don't see why it would be that much harder to expand 1,500 words into 50,000 words," which it's not that much harder. It's just a much longer process. And since then, I've done a handful of books for people. Some of them, they came to me with a very robust outline, and I just helped them turn it into something a little more storytelling and rather than just spitting out facts. Some of them were just straight, I have this story that I want to tell, help me tell it. And so we had to figure out how to organize it, plan it all out, structure the whole thing, and then dive into the book itself. And so now that AI has come up, blogging took a big tank. A lot of people don't want to pay for blogs anymore. They're comfortable with free and mediocre rather than great and paid for. And so now I'm leaning heavily into the books. I'll still do blogs if people want something much better than what ChatGPT can spit out, but leaning more into books because people's personal story, their history, ChatGPT can't dive into your brain and pull out those stories and get those emotions out of you. Not yet, anyway. Not till we got that weird little. I've seen it in sci-fi. You plug your brain in and it just uploads everything.
there's those that I know believe that's coming. I kind of hope that it doesn't. I got enough holes in my head that are self-inflicted without adding something weird there. And I don't know that a lot of us, and this is totally off topic, but like most of us shouldn't do that when it comes right down to it. Like we don't want to see what's in our head out into the universe. That's just how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
There's the old. I don't know if anybody on here has seen it. There's a meme running around of what my brain does at midnight when I lay down to go to bed. And it's a kid sitting in a kiddie pool playing a flaming set of bagpipes wearing a Darth Vader mask. And I mean, it's hysterical. And it's not AI generated. Somebody built this. And I
Mm-hmm.
just laugh about that. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of what's going on in my head. No, and the world doesn't need plugged in to see that. So with that, man, there's the big challenge in ghostwriting to my eye. right? And as I look at this, because to be able to step in and tell the voice, to be able to put on the Darth Vader mask and play the flaming bagpipes, like what do you need to know? What how do you get into a relationship such that you can tell that authentic story through their voice?
So it's a lot of interviews. One that we're still trying to get it off to being printed. It started a long time ago, but he's kind of taken a lot of breaks on it. It's just we sat down. I can't remember exactly how many hours of interviews, probably 50, 60, 70 hours of interviews where he just told his stories and all the different things that happened to him throughout his life. And I'd known him before this, so I knew kind of how he spoke and how he acted, and a little bit bits and pieces of his story. But through those interviews, I can hear how he talks, and most of us want to write the same way that we talk, but a little bit more formal. If you actually just dictated in a dictation service, put your exact voice onto paper, you would sound like an absolute buffoon, or you'd read like one. You sound normal when you're hearing it, but we use so much slang, so many contractions, so many blended words that it does not read very well. So I take that. I know how he speaks now. I know the tone of voice, how many f bombs he drops. Cleaned it up a little bit because we don't need a book completely filled with f bombs. But then I can tell the story the same way he tells it, knowing that this is how he speaks, this is how he talks, this is hopefully what's going through his head when I'm writing this stuff out. And then I have them review it and get some feedback on that. So if it's completely off base, like, no, this isn't how it happened at all, then I can go back and I can just kind of flip it just a little bit. I can hear how they respond to it and I can adjust to make sure it matches their tone of voice a little bit better.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And it's we don't write the way that we speak, and I hadn't really put that together. So recently, I went through the um, abysmal project. It's done. I'm thrilled of actually putting my book on Audible, on audiobook. So you sit down and you write it and you read it and you feel really good about it. And then you have to go back and read it word for word on the microphone. And it is extremely challenging because the way that I speak, the inflections that I have, didn't quite match. Like the audio wasn't matching the video. It was really really challenging to do so, and it's because I use a lot of contractions. I'm using different inflections. I wanted to drop the f bomb a few times, didn't do it because we didn't do it in the book. But it was remarkably challenging because I had thought at one point, maybe that's how I do this. Maybe I just voice record the whole thing and the transcription will come out and it'll be fabulous. But we know that's not true. And even taking transcriptions from the show, when I pull the transcription, there's a mountain of editing that needs to be done in 26 minutes. Like a ridiculous amount of editing that would have to be done, and it doesn't really speak to the tonality of what's
Mm-hmm.
really being said. So it's a massive challenge, even for those of us that write books, and have written a couple. It's a huge challenge to get that tonality onto page so that the person reading the book is feeling what we're feeling when we're writing it. So I can imagine from a ghostwriter perspective there's a huge challenge. And you made a point of saying it, and I laughed and I smiled big when you said it. Was people are willing to settle for cheap and free and junk versus great and paid for. That resonated. Just, man, that's a gut punch for a lot of people. And think about the books that you read. The books that you read that are out there. My father-in-law is a great example. Is he'll go out and he'll buy a collection of 12 books that cost him $5 to get this collection of 12 books. And then he'll complain about the quality of the book, of what it was. The editing is bad, the publishing's bad, the layout's bad, all the things that are in there. But it's because he's going for, cheap and free and poorly put together, versus those high quality. So you and I met a couple years ago, and I'm curious if this is still the same one, that when you and I met, and we met at a convention in Denver. We sat down. Just we hadn't, we'd said hi to each other from across the room. We sat down and had breakfast that morning and talked gardening for like an hour. It was awesome. I mean, it was just a great morning to unplug and just learn a little bit more about each other. And I think about that as the interview process. And you were ghostwriting for a gentleman at that time that built like a grizzly bear. I mean, the dude is just ripped. Is this the same individual that he's still working on that project? Okay.
Yep. So just different life events caused him to have to take a bunch of breaks, restructured mostly his whole life for the most part. Went new career, everything. Went back to bare knuckle boxing. Used to be an MMA fighter. Went back to bare knuckle boxing, so he was heavily training for that. We couldn't really sit down and work on the book while he was, because when he goes in, he's an ex addict, so he goes in and he goes all in. If he's focused on something, when he was focused on drugs, that was all he was focused on. And then once he got clean, now he was all focused on MMA. He doesn't want the distractions. He's been doing that, and then now he's back to he's started a remodeling business, and so he's just trying to come up with the funds to get this thing professionally edited. We could probably go skip that part, but like you said, you skip those parts and you end up with a book that people are like, "Wow, this looks great," and then you get into it and you're like, "Oh, this is hard to read because there's issues with it."
Yeah,
So you don't
that's
you don't want a hard to
it's
read
totally
book.
true. Yeah, I did, in my latest one, in the new book that I just finished up reading, and Scott and I were going to have a conversation about that one, was you run it through through Word, you run it through Google, you run it through, AI. Hey, I want you to look for misspellings and, whatever you're going to use it for as an editorial piece. And then you give it to a live person to read. They read it. And it's like, there were mistakes we found in my book that was like 6 or 7 layers deep of trying to get it through these different layers of quality control. It still went to print. We're still missing a word, and the person that found the word is 12 years old, is the one that was reading it, is a 12-year-old kid, and he's like, I was reading the book and it's missing a word, I think it's supposed to be this. So I mean, of all those layers of quality control, and we still had professionals that were in it, things still happen, but it requires professionals. It requires quality control. You can't run it through the first layer of Word and expect that it's going to come out, that's going to be War and Peace or, Wuthering Heights or something. It's just not going to happen. That technology does not exist. As good as all those cool things are, they get you a percentage, but hiring a true professional is what gets you the professional grade. I totally agree with that. So longer way to go. So aside from that one, the next question I wanted to ask is like, what do you see beginning? What's the biggest mistake you see beginning authors making?
Um, Usually they have a great story. They have this fantastic idea, and they have life events that support it and education that coincides with it. So they have their personal experience tied into their educational experience, and they can create something unique. One of the things I write is it's Ecclesiastes chapter 1, I think, says there's nothing new under the sun. Everything that's done has been done. Everything that's learned has been learned. Somebody has come up with your idea before you, especially now, several thousand years after that book was written. Uh, Things aren't, and we're not smart enough. You and I, maybe some people are smart enough to come up with brand new ideas, but I'm definitely not. I'm regurgitating old stuff. So, how do you make a book that's old ideas into something new, and it's combining it with your personal experience? So everything I've learned, I've applied in a different way than other people have, and so I can get at this unique take on a particular knowledge set. The biggest mistake I see people making is they just dive into their book. They're like, okay, I'm going to write out my entire book. I'm going to type out my whole story without sitting down and thinking, who's going to read this or who do I want to read this? They don't think, what do I want the key takeaways to be? They don't plan the book out. They don't structure it. They just start, maybe an autobiography, they just start at the beginning and go toward where they are now. Autobiographies don't have to be chronological. They can be jumping around here and there. Ideally, there's some chronological order to it so people don't get lost and confused, but it doesn't have to start at birth and go to where you are now. It can be, here's my early life, jump to later life, go back to the early life, and tie those two together and say, here's why I think the way I do now. Here's the story that influenced that. And so most people try to skip over all this planning that goes into a book, and they don't realize that a big chunk of the work is actually figuring out what your book is going to do and be about, and how it's going to be written and who's going to read it. They think the work is typing the book, which is, it's tedious, but it's probably the easiest part of writing a book.
Yeah, the pre-work, and that was one of the reasons. I'm using myself as an example here because I can speak to a lot of this. Is that was one of the reasons it took so long for me to write the first book that I wrote, and I think I had just finished that one when I met you. When I finished the first one, I think it was right about there. But it literally took me like 45 years to get that book done because I wasn't writing it the right way. I wasn't starting the right way. I hadn't done the planning to go, okay, who's the book who am I writing it for? Who's going to read it? How do they want to read it? What's the message they want to get out of it? And then really just building out the outline. I literally started exactly like you described. I'm just going to start writing the book, and then I'm going to write the whole book, and I'm going to finish the book at the end. Um, Common logic says that's how you do it. That's the hard way. That was a really, really hard way. And I got engaged with someone that understood how and said, no, 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 no. Here's your basic outline. Write it out this way, do this, and gave me the structure, and then basically kind of put a gun to my head and said, you need to finish this in 30 days. You've been sitting on it for 45 years. Get it done. Was the challenge. And I accepted it. It took me like 37. I didn't quite meet the 30, but I got the draft. We were not done with the book, but the draft was done, and we got it out. And then it gets easier. It gets so much easier after that. So you talked about earlier, or I mentioned it in your bio as well. When you have a body of work, because that's really what a book is. That's what your book is. It's a body of work about you. Articles, all the things that you get to put your name on, and it creates that authority in your industry. Talk to the audience a little bit more about that. Of why that I know why it is. Like, why is that so critically important, particularly for entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So just started kind of relaying what I do and why it's important in this manner. So if you go back to about the 1980s and you had a bachelor's degree or you had a high school diploma, you were ahead of the pack. You were hireable just about anything you wanted to do. You could get a great job, pension, all the things. Uh, Maybe a little further back, 70s, 60s, 70s. By the 80s, you had to have a bachelor's degree. More and more people were going to college. They were getting this degree. It was stamping that approval, saying you put in the discipline, the effort. It didn't really matter as much what your degree was. You just had that degree that would help land a good job. By the 90s, you had to have a specialized bachelor's degree. You couldn't just have a liberal arts degree and expect to get a really good job because people wanted a little bit more defined roles. By the late 90s, early 2000s, that turned into a master's degree. More and more people are getting degrees. Online school became a thing. It became more accessible to people. And so now you need a master's degree to really stand out from the crowd. Well, now getting a master's degree, I could go 2 clicks of a button and I'm enrolled in a new program now. It cost me a lot of money, but the barrier to entry is now just, do you have the money to pay for it? It's not, the application process, the slogging through all the things. You just pay for a degree for the most part. There are a lot of online schools that do that. I don't agree with them. I think it's a poor way to do it, but it's neither here nor there. So if it's so easy to get a master's degree and a lot of people are doing it, how do you really set yourself apart? Well, writing a book. If you're a published author, like if I'm going to hire Jake or this consultant, and I see Jake has published 4 books and this consultant has published 0 books, Jake's the person I'm going to gravitate towards because he has that authority. He's put in, even if his books are absolutely terrible, I'm probably not even going to sit down and read them before I hire him, but he put in the effort to actually write the book, which is why I really appreciate places like Amazon that are not allowing AI generated books, or they are, but you have to heavily disclose that, because an AI generated book is really just picking and choosing things around the internet and putting words together, and now you're a published author even though you didn't do any work. So if you've written a book, one that's actually a book that you wrote, it's not just that you're a published author, you have the discipline to do that. And so now it stamps that approval. Now, if I'm a published author and I want to go speak on stage, I have the authority behind what I say. I say, here, I wrote this entire book. I'm going to talk about chapter 1 or the main concept, and here's why. And now I can get on stage a lot easier. I can book consulting gigs. I can get those those chairman of the board type positions because I have the authority behind me. And it's kind of like people use this one all the time. It's the new business card. Somebody gives me a business card. I'm like, hey, cool. I'm never going to look at that thing. It's just going to sit in a pile on my desk until I can't remember where I met the person, and I throw it away. But if I have a book in front of me, I'm not going to throw a book away. Like, they gave me this book. It's got literal weight to it. And so it's a business card on steroids that can help push you into that next role that you want to get into.
Yeah, agreed. And I think you and Daniel Gomez and I were having that conversation and literally talking about, and I think you asked me, okay, well, where are your books? And of course they were, halfway across the room sitting over on the table, kind of smirked at me a little bit like you should have it with you when you're having because it is that it's a, here's my business card. This is a body of work that I did. And to your point of its literal weight, somebody's going to feel that. Absolutely agree with it. And yeah, I mean, there's the quality of the book has so much to do with it, and right now it's a battleground. Like on the marketing thing is a whole different thing to get it there, but I will absolutely promise you that the books that are breaking through, that are making it into organically into the bestseller list, sure, there's a cheat for it. There's a way to get there on those. I'm not going to share that with you, but there's a way to do it. But to organically get there, like legitimate people are buying the book, people are reading the book, people are reviewing and rating the books. Whether you're using Amazon, Ingram Spark, Barnes and Noble, all of the different ones, or you hire a publicist to do it. Um, they've got to be good. They've got to be quality. They've got to have the right titles. They've got to have the right cover art. They've got to have the right back cover art. Like there's so much more that goes into it. So that's why you hire. That's why you bring the guys like Scott into the mix and into the program to help you get those things done. Whether it's so what are all obviously you ghostwrite, and that's a major component of what you do. What else within the author space can you help these authors make sure they get their message out there?
Yep. So if they've written a book already, I can come in as a developmental editor that basically reads their book and looks at the flow, the consistency, making sure the story is told in a way that doesn't confuse the readers. I've done this a couple times where I just go through and basically I just pull up the Word document, and anything that doesn't make sense, I highlight it, I add a comment. I say, where are you going here? What's this guy? Who's this guy? Why did you put this? This should go back at the beginning of the book, not toward the end, because you need to set up the stage. Even a nonfiction book really needs that character development and the plot that builds upon, and then the climax, and then resolution, and all the things we learned in creative writing. It's not as important when you're not, talking about dragons and whatever else, but it's still important to guide that reader through. Otherwise, you end up with a really dry and really boring book. And we read all of those in college. Like they have great information, but they just suck to read. And that's not going to get you to the bestseller list. The bestseller list is the great information woven into a story. I just saw a quote. It was the best compliment a writer can receive is not that it's well written, it's that the reader forgot they were reading. They're
They just
so
got
into the
immersed in
book
the story.
that they forget they're even reading the book. And I read a lot of nonfiction, and rarely do I actually forget that I'm reading. Rarely do I want to turn the page and figure out what's coming next. Fiction writers are much better at that, but it's also all made up. It's a story that is encouraging people. That's the whole point of fiction, is to keep you turning the pages. The point of nonfiction is to impart information and value.
No, totally true. So we're already burning up against the wall on time, man. I love when podcast interviews go like this. That it's like, man, we need like 2 more hours. We didn't even talk about gardening. We didn't even talk about going outside or doing anything. We just talked about the
Mhm.
book the whole time, which is awesome because it's what you do. So I will, you know, we've been rolling it across the screen on the bottom. Scott, how does the audience get a hold of you?
Yep. ScottSiri.com is my website. If you type in Scott Siri on Google, it will pull up all the social medias. I try to stay fairly active on most of those. Don't do things like Pinterest because never really applied to me. But very easy to find. I believe there is a button right on my homepage that says learn how to write a book, something along those lines. Click on that. It will take you to my free guide on how to write a book. It's a huge post. Each chapter has a learn more about this, and it'll take you to the larger piece there. So it's easy to read, easy to follow, easy to get through. In the end, you'll know how to write a book, and then you have to decide, do you want to hire a guide? I can guide you through it to teach you exactly how to do it. Do you want to try it all on your own, or do you just want a ghostwriter to take over the process for you so you don't have to worry about anything other than just telling your story? So
Yep. So that is
obviously,
scottseri.com, SCOTTSERY.com, that you can find him there. And I will totally tell you guys, because I've walked down this road a few times, hire help. Get on board, get the help. It will make the process so much more enjoyable, to get it there, and then you've got the energy to go market your book because there's more work to be done there. Once you
mhm.
get the book done and it's awesome because Scott helped you with it, there's more work to be done. You just don't get to go out there and compete with Mark Victor Hansen. Love Mark. He's a great guy. Like I've had the chance to meet him a couple times, but like for me to do battle with Mark, in the marketing space is a lot of work. So you better have some energy left in the tank when you get there. So, Scott, thank you so much for your time today, man. Really appreciate you. This was awesome. Good luck going forward, and I can't wait to see what your new projects are and eventually get to read the book that the guy's dragging his feet on. That's going to be fantastic, man.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. On behalf of myself, Dr. Jake Clendenning, and Michael Labersi, it is your turn.